I can get used to this.
Me too.
Experience more with a $100 credit at hundreds of hotels from Chase Sapphire Reserve. Chase, make more of what's yours.
I'm Matt Brennan. I'm Deputy Entertainment Editor at the Los Angeles Times. Welcome to the Theater Camp panel.
Woo! Yeah! Woo! Theater Camp. Sundance.
Welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. This is really fun.
Yeah, thank you.
So you all were friends before making this project and before the short that preceded it. And I think that really comes through in the film itself. I'm wondering, can you tell us the story of how you became like a little crew?
Sure. Ben and I met when we were 3, and I was deeply in love with him. And he told me repeatedly that he was gay for many years. And I was like, that means you like me, right? Like, if you're gay, you like women. Yeah, and then we met Nick in high school. Ben and I, at that point, had done like a million community theater pieces and played every age and appropriate role. And then Nick and Ben were collaborators in high school. And then we met Noah doing a workshop of a musical. And then we just started making shit together. I think we were always really inspired by like collectives that had come up together and just were making shit with their friends, like a Christopher Guest. And we were collecting all these wonderful other actors and we're like, oh, we want to create this space where they could come and really have agency with their roles and get to improv, because, you know, as actors, like, you only get about 10 minutes at the end of each take to really play. And we were like, what if the whole movie was that? And it was a gift that we got to do it.
Since you brought up Christopher Guest, I have to ask, were you sort of thinking about the sort of correspondences with Waiting for Guffman? Is that like a favorite of yours? Is that something that you were like, okay, this needs an update? Like, how much did you want to draw on that, and how much did you want to differentiate yourself from it?
Well, we definitely love that movie. We think that movie's amazing. And we, it's like definitely a very specific documentary style that they're trying to emulate with that movie. And I think we, were interested in doing something that was maybe a little more based in like verite documentaries and not being so interview based. That's like a more practical thing. But, I think that they have such an amazing ensemble, and also like we know he like edits for a year. We did not have a year to edit this film. It was very quick, and so trying to balance, I think, the freedom of just letting people go and have that confidence that the performers were going to just generate so much amazing material, but also being very clear about the roadmap. I think that's not to differentiate from him, but that was definitely one way that we were thinking about it since we were making like a small indie,
Ben and Noah as performers, and Molly, like what are the challenges of having this sort of like blank slate kind of approach where you can really play and bring things to it, but where you also maybe don't have as many guardrails or guideposts starting out?
I think we are in a special situation, the three of us, given that, we all wrote the film together and we spent a lot of time, very carefully outlining it and creating like a scriptment with scenes that would differ from being just sort of outlined in terms of what the action is to all the way written to somewhere in the middle. And so I think we were very clear about our boundaries. I think eventually all the actors in the film were very clear about the controlled chaos within which they could, go off. But I think us particularly, we had a very kind of like bird's eye view of the piece. So I felt very safe, on top of the fact that this is my fiance and my best friends, and so I felt very I felt incredibly free to try things and fail and jump off of ledges, and we just wanted to extend that feeling to everybody that was on the set with us. And I think that it was for us a lot about just tailoring the experience to each individual performer. And there's some people who are more outwardly comfortable with improv, or whose background lies more in improv, and so they maybe needed less of a launch pad. And there's some, some of the kids or, some actors who live more in a dramatic world where we wanted to give them a much clearer scene to begin with and then sort of jump off from. So I think the flexibility with which we approached each moment was really nice, and not necessarily deciding that we had to have a kind of a headline way of approaching each individual sequence and letting them all be different.
Well, I'm going to come to you next, Noah, because one of the scenes where I was like, I have to ask about this is the moment where your character rolls down the hill during Tech Week. Yes. Can you talk about how that came about? Because that made me lol.
We had like a morning before we were shooting with the kids. Shooting with kids is really hard because they can only work a certain number of hours a day. And so the sort of nature of the like slapdash 19 days to shoot this giant thing with a musical at the end and children and like 30 speaking roles and the list goes on. We tried to just sort of like any free moment we had, we were like, this is perfect. We'll grab some B-roll or we'll, do this or we'll do this. And so basically we were like, one morning we were like, we're just going to start. And Nick was like, no, I need to just like run around. And so they just filmed me sort of like, our DP, Nate Hertel, is just like chasing me around with his rig like all morning. And then at a certain point, Ben was like, roll down the hill. And I was like, okay. And I rolled down the hill. And it shockingly made it into the film.
I was concerned about it. I think Molly and Ben were really advocating that you roll. And I was like, no.
He was like, he has a tool belt on. He could hurt himself.
So that was Molly and Ben.
I mean, you motored down that hill. Like, I was impressed at your speed.
I really appreciate that.
We have a lot of takes of that too, because we made him do it a lot.
You guys need to drop the blooper reel online. Yeah. I have one other sort of specific thing that I wanted to ask about in the vein of being playful, and it's the final song. The transformation from the moment in the rehearsal where you're sort of like making it up on the fly to how that actually ends, like that beautiful song that ends.
We don't want to give too much of what happens away, if that's okay. Sorry, just so people haven't seen it.
Well, tell me about like what the.
We can talk about the writing of the songs.
Yeah, let's talk about the songwriting process then,
Great.
and about how you keep that sense of play in something that you have to write in advance that you can't just make up on the fly, presumably.
I mean, I'd like to think that was also like a nice, Ben said this earlier, but there's like, we tried to set ourselves up with these boundaries, and I think having this full musical at the end of the movie was like a nice thing to look forward to, a nice, bookend that helped us, I think, keep on track. But in terms of writing the music, we wrote all the music with our songwriting partner, Mark Son and Blick, who's lovely. We just worked on Spirited. Yeah, let's get a woo from Mark Son and Blick. But it was so fun. It was like another entire writing process, but with a fifth collaborator. And we just got to sit down and play,
And it was nice to, we're all theater nerds, as is hopefully clear. And so to have something, I think, we've all, maybe some more than others, maybe I'm speaking for myself and putting it on others, but dreamt of, writing a musical or being involved in something like that. And so to do that in the context of something so absurd and to have such clear references and like jumping off points to begin the process with kind of freed us up for the more kind of flexible moments in the story making to have this fully crafted little micro musical.
Well, it feels very organic, which is why I just got carried away with myself and almost spoiled the ending. You should see it for yourselves. On the point of it, the sort of capturing the absurdity, I was really curious, for each of you, what's your funniest or sort of most crazy theater camp or theater kid memory that didn't make the cut in the movie?
One time, Molly and I were in doing a summer theater program together at this place called the Adderley School, where we did a lot of theater together in Los Angeles. And the cast party, we were maybe like 11 and 12. The cast party the day after the show was a pajama party. And so everybody came, and I thought the pajama party means you wear exactly what you wear to sleep. So I wore a t-shirt and pajama pants, and that was it. And we were playing like some sort of theater version of Duck, Duck, Goose. And I got picked, and Molly was next to me. And she was playing the game correctly, to her credit, and was pulling on my pants to try to keep me from running around. And you can kind of guess the rest.
And I liked him, really so I got to see it. It was great.
When I played the Artful Dodger when I was probably about 8, I got really also carried away listening to Nancy sing and just urinated on stage. And so that was, yeah.
You were so moved you pissed?
Yes, I was brought to piss by the performance.
Literally brought to piss.
That's classic. One of the things that the film plays with really effectively is that sort of school musical theater camp phenomenon of kids playing absurdly inappropriately adult roles. Yes. Do you have memories of what that was like when you were kids, like of feeling, did you feel uncomfortable? Did it feel exciting to you? Was it something that you were like, just didn't really understand what you were saying? How does that actually feel from the inside out?
I mean, I definitely didn't understand anything that was going on, but I also think working with so many kids reminded me of that time where I wasn't self-conscious at all. And even doing improv with so many kids, you would just throw them a line or a note and they'd be like, okay, 100%. And you know, if you say that to an adult actor, there's a moment of self-consciousness. Did you like that? How can I do better? And they're just so free. And so I think, yes, I didn't know what was going on, but I think I was probably better when I was younger. I think I've gotten more nervous and self-conscious as I've gotten older.
She played Lola to my Joe and Damn Yankees and did a whole like striptease for me, and she was maybe 6.
So this was pre-cancel culture.
Yeah, very pre. Yeah.
On the flip side, you know, you have some real comic heavyweights in the adult cast. Jimmy Tatro from American Vandal, Aida Beery, who had a great year with The Bear. What was the casting process like? How are these folks that you already knew from working with them previously, or from relationships in Hollywood, or did you have like open casting for the adult roles?
It was kind of a mixed bag. Like Patty and Io are like girlfriends of mine, and know Ben and Noah, and like we just asked them, and when they said yes, it was like kind of an electric feeling. And then Owen I've known since I was 3, and then Jimmy we like wrote it for in his voice, but
yeah, we were really just a fan of his.
Yeah.
And he's amazing. And Amy Sedaris, of course.
Talk about how she got involved in the project, because she has relatively minimal screen time, but is like she just like packs so much punch. How did she like? Did you reach out to her and say, we have this crazy idea?
Yeah, she's such a like sort of mother of alt comedy in the sense, and such a blessing to have her kind of christen the film in the beginning. And so I think we reached out hoping she would understand the vibe. We sent the short, as we did when we asked anyone to be part of the film, and wrote a note all together, just trying to express, you know, how special it was and how right for her tone and what she loves it would be. And of course, she's incredibly smart and knows what she finds funny, and so was really game to do it. And I think that was the first thing we shot as well, was her sequence. And so I think the sort of realness of seeing the first day of our feature that we made as friends together, and having it be Amy Sedaris like on camera, just so at ease, and obviously an improv whiz, just kind of letting the whole thing take flight like on her, you know, on her wing, was really an amazing beginning. And she literally reverberates throughout the film, as everyone will see, but she also her energy really reverberates throughout, I would say, as well.
Also, she almost was not in the film because she couldn't find a babysitter for her rabbit Tina, who is a boy. Don't worry, we found a rabbit sitter.
It paid off.
It did.
You know, you just brought up the short again, Ben. I'm curious about sort of the process of actually, you know, after you made the short, at what point did you then say, this makes sense to expand into a feature? And what were actually the steps? I mean, this is like perfect subject matter for a Sundance conversation. What were the actual steps that you took next to then transform it into a feature?
Yeah, I mean, we knew that we wanted to make something together, and we knew we wanted to make what, you know, the short was about a world that we really loved, so we could make fun of it. We felt like we had the right to make fun of it. And then after we felt like we had something with that, we just didn't know if we wanted to make it into a TV show or a movie. and then when we settled on making it a movie, it's just it's a weird kind of movie, and we're first-time filmmakers, and it was just hard to find a home for it. And Elbaum, our producer, just never gave up on it, and Picture Start really got it. And like, I don't know, the comedies that we look up to, like Christopher Guest, like they don't really make a lot of movies like that anymore, because sometimes at the time people didn't see them. So it's hard to be like, do you want to make something that maybe people won't want to see right now, but in 20 years they're gonna like it? But yeah, and then from there, the four of us, once we had the go-ahead, just were figuring out how to make it into something larger.
Yeah, it was just, I think it was important to us to try to take the lessons and the methodology with which we made the short and retain a bit of that. It was like almost scarier to try to figure out how to do that in a more traditional way, in terms of like not doing it with improv, not like having so much freedom with the kids. And so I think it was something where we like really wanted to keep that spirit of like the freedom and the fun and yet still like justify that this is a movie and not just like a bunch of people hanging out. And so I think those were the twin poles of our work.
And what was the reaction when you all found out that you were going to be premiering at Sundance?
Nick was brought to piss.
What can I say? No, I mean, we freaked out. Yeah.
This festival, they call you the filmmakers directly, and usually everything gets like, goes through the studio or the financiers, and we got to have that moment. And Nick and I were in our little box in Brooklyn, still editing the movie with our editor, and we were like hysterically crying and FaceTimed Ben and Noah, and it's like such a dream, and so many movies that were inspirations for this have come out of this festival. We like cannot believe it, and that it's in person, because I think this movie should be seen in person. Obviously, wherever we end up, we'll be happy and watch it online. You'll like it. But just laughter is infectious, and after COVID, like to all get to be in a room together, it's just such a joy.
And that's sort of true of what you're paying tribute to. Is like there is nothing like live theater and being in a room with a bunch of other people who you can hear laughing or crying or screaming or whatever it may be.
Absolutely. I mean, I think like there was a both conscious and subconscious feeling that we all had to make a movie that didn't necessarily feel so stuck in this particular moment or in time, that had a bit of a timelessness to it in the sense of not being overly reliant on technology, or just really focusing on the real live experience, not only of theater, but of being at a place like a camp with all of these kids and having an in-person experience that's like formative and really changes you, that we all have had in different ways. And so, as Molly was saying, it's very full circle to now get to experience that in the purest way. One of the few things that the pandemic hasn't really wrenched away or shifted is what it's like to take something in person.
It's interesting that you say that, because one of the things I had wanted to ask about was the costuming of the kids. I may just be getting old, but I was like, what year is this? So I'm curious, more broadly, take me through the process of actually recreating the atmosphere of a theater camp with Adirondacks, because I felt like there's so much texture to it, and I'm curious like what that process looked like.
We were shooting at like a defunct Jewish sleepaway camp. So that was helpful, that we sort of like, the location was sort of given, and it was run down like we needed it to be, Yeah,
totally. We got all of that for free. And then we did do like a lot of research pretty extensively into like theater camps and what they're looking. I mean, we had a lot of memories from our own past, but then did look at, we like totally built that theater the like main stage theater. That's like a building that was there, but we created a theater there. So yeah, I mean, it was definitely a process to not have it feel like a literal period piece, though I guess maybe it did at times, but what year it was. But I think that there is that, like, even the way that we designed the look of the movie kind of has this like 16 millimeter, like verite doc look. And I think it was very conscious that we, like Ben said, to make it sort of timeless.
Totally, and definitely an amalgam of all of our different little pieces of memories and customs and objects and posters and things that we have all carried through our experiences I just think that there's no replacement for the specificity of that, whether or not it made the cut or whether or not individual, ideas or objects or moments that we all contributed are there. I think it's the sum of its parts feeling like something that wasn't just created from scratch, that it came from like a real ephemeral like place.
And at the end, the reaction from the children was heave sobbing that the summer was over, in the way that I think we all experience the end of a musical or the end of summer camp. You're so sad to leave the place or leave the thing or leave the people. And we got that very reaction from the kids, and it felt so validating for us that we had, created this little microcosm for them to exist in and thrive within.
And yeah, maybe you'll see some of the posters of other original musicals that Ben and Molly's characters wrote. Molly came up with some of the craziest things that anyone's ever said, and we put them on a poster, and they're hiding throughout the film.
I won't give those away, but they were on my list of questions. In terms of the research that you did, what struck you about theater camps now that's different from when you all were kids?
I mean, what was interesting is a lot of them were closed for COVID, so I'm not sure exactly right now, but just phones were not, we didn't have phones for the first a week or so, and then when I got my phone, I had nothing to do. I had a flip phone, so I had nothing to do on it. I was I had a text from my dad being hey. So it just wasn't, I'm sure there's this hunger to get your phone back in this new way, and so we were really soul searching, should they have phones, should they not, and we just wanted to live in a world where their phones were taken away.
And I think to a certain extent, theater camps are a bit of a time capsule in the sense that maybe the way that kids dress has changed and the kinds of things they're talking about and the TikTok and all of that. But when you look at productions from places like Stage Door and French Woods, they've really looked the same for a really long time, which is a beautiful thing,
Just as bad as it did in the 90s, yeah.
It's just as much warmth and elbow grease, and it's that's the point of coming to a camp. It's not to have this beautifully perfect, technologically advanced production. It's to really pull yourself up by your bootstraps and make something with your friends, which is what we were doing in a very meta sense as well. So I think part of what was really attractive to us about the location and also just this subject matter is how unaffected it's been by time in a certain way.
One of the things that I found most moving about the film is that while there are jokes about a little bit of squabbling between the kids, for the most part, the whole sort of gestalt of the film is we're going to pull together as a group to make something. And I'm wondering if you all could, I'm going to ask a little sappy question, if you all could talk about what drew you to theater as a kid and what you got out of it, not professionally, but sort of personally, emotionally.
I'm a very introverted person, and I reach my limit when it comes to socializing or trying to connect with other people, as my fiance will attest. And as a kid, I think that was a bit more extreme. And I think in a lot of other places in my life, I kept very much to myself and lived very much in my own mind. And theater was a place to just come alive and come out of my shell and try and fail and jump off of ledges and meet people like Molly, who, has been my theater partner since I was able to walk. And and that's the end.
The magic of theater.
The magic of theater.
So that's the ghost of theater.
But yeah, I guess just long story short, it's sort of always been my way of connecting with other people, and it's been the vehicle through which I can show people who I am and see who other people are.
It's twofold for me. I had older siblings who did it, and I really just wanted to hang out with them. And so I was really just following my sister around. But I was also, I had a deep appreciation for it. I remember my sister was in a middle school production of The Wiz, and I wanted to go to every rehearsal and just sort of sit in the back and watch, because I was fascinated by the process and the whole rigmarole of it. It was so juicy and appealing to me. And I was always somebody who was just my report cards were always talks too much, very loud. And
that's still my report card.
But I was, it was a place for me to get all my yayas out. It was a way for me to stretch myself and get to just be as big as I wanted to be. Yeah.
But you're so little.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I was never that good at school, and I got to go to this program with Ben, this community theater, and it was like the first moment that I ever owned my intelligence, because any answer is right and you can try anything. And I definitely would never have wanted to direct a movie or anything like that without knowing that I could color outside the lines and that would be okay. And even if our teacher was screaming at me that I was bad, it was still a choice. It just wasn't the right one.
I mean, I was the new kid a lot in school, and I just remember being in I was new in 10th grade, which is a random year, and getting cast in a musical with Ben, and just finding people, whatever, it makes me emotional, but it really did, meeting Ben and becoming friends with Ben and this amazing group that made this movie. It's life-changing when you're a young person to finally be in a space where it's we're all gonna keep being weird and doing these things that why are we doing them, and then it's then you put layers on top of that, but you always know that you saw that part, that really raw child part of each other, and it just means everything to us.
Thank you all for sharing those feelings. I'm going to end on something a little bit more lighthearted before I toss it out to the audience. One of my favorite sequences in the movie, or really any movie, are the auditions. And I'm wondering, just rapid fire lightning round, what's your go-to audition song, or was?
Oh my gosh.
This is honestly a trigger. How dare you? You said it was lighthearted.
I often sing the very lighthearted song called How Glory Goes from a musical called Floyd Collins, which is about a miner that's trapped in a cave realizing he's not going to make it out.
I embarrassingly sang. I think this was maybe my last real musical theater audition was for Glee back in the day, and I think I sang John Legend's "All of Me."
Yeah, I don't know if I have an answer to that one. I'll have to think.
I don't know, I would always bring avocado stained paper. I can't make you love me. Yeah. And they'd be like, do you have a theater song? And I'd be like, I didn't bring one. This is what I'm missing.
Nick?
I have to go?
Yeah.
They forced you, not me, for
I
the
know,
record.
true. I think I sang Soon It's Gonna Rain from the Fantastics.
Love
Love that song.
it.
Anyone out there have a question for the group?
We have A's.
I actually can't see very well because of the... No? Oh.
Yeah.
Any future projects in the works?
We're going to see how this one goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just finished the movie last week. So I think we're all...
The next project is sleep for extended periods of time.
I mean, to follow up on that, I would be curious to hear, what your hopes are for this project. What would your dream scenario be looking back on it a year from now?
I mean, we definitely want people to see this movie and, get out into the world. It's as Molly said, it's so great to be seen in a room with people, we hope, but wherever it lands, we just hope that people get a chance to see it.
And I hope it's a theater film that a lot of people will see that wouldn't necessarily think they'd see a theater film, in quotes, because I think it is about this one particular passion and, community and sending that up, but it is about much, I think, larger, more universal things like being an outsider in a place like that and learning to love people for their weirdness and, relationships that have lasted since you were a kid and how they dissolve or stay together and just how to, as you said, kind of all come together and make something happen. So I think, and comedically as well, I think there's something for people who don't necessarily know the Sondheim jokes or anything like that. I think it's a bit broader than people might think. So I just hope that people will see it that might not think they're going to.
Have there been other ideas that you all have sort of collaborated on that haven't quite sort of gestated enough to take on yet, that this experience, you're like, oh yeah, I would love to work with them again in that capacity?
Well, Nick has directed many of my music videos personally as an artist, and so I certainly hope in the future that we can make more things like that, maybe some more long-form things like that. And I'm sure there's many different permutations and combinations of these four people, writing and directing and acting and et cetera, that we hopefully look forward to.
Are there any challenges or pitfalls to working closely with people who you also are close friends with or engaged to?
I mean, I was watching an interview with the Daniels, and they were saying that when you work with they're a twosome, and when you work with your friends and when you collaborate, like a bad idea gets shut down immediately. Like you don't waste your time going down, and we're just like, no, that's not. We're not going to do that.
That's
and
not
it's like,
funny.
Yeah, and it's like that trust is amazing, because I think when you are young, you get thrown into these new experience on any job, and you're like trusting these people, and you don't really know if your taste lines up. And so that was so great, and I just feel like it stopped us from like wasting time.
Yeah, we also lived in a house together, the four of us, while we were filming this movie, like 12 minutes from the camp, and sort of just like a portrait of a dinner is me like roasting 2 chickens at once, and like Nick is furiously like typing up some sort of Excel spreadsheet. Ben
Molly
is
writing alt lines.
singing somewhere. Molly's like doing her like wrist weights in the corner while like.
Now I want a documentary about the making of theater camp.
Honestly, a companion piece.
Where was the camp, by the way? You mentioned that you shot at a real sleepaway camp.
Warwick, New York.
Was that choice of location based on, like, in your mind, that geography says theater camp, or were there, like, what were the considerations of that?
There was a moment where we were going back and forth between, but coastally, like either are we going to shoot this in LA or are we going to shoot it in New York? And I think we all sort of felt that we were yearning for the woods of the Northeast.
And we were so lucky. Like probably the luckiest thing of this whole movie is that Bernie Telsey, the amazing New York casting director, did this like as a favor, and Christian, his Charbonnier, who he works with, did it too, and they were amazing. And we wanted New York kids because obviously kids are amazing in any state, but those theater kids are just unbelievable. So once we knew we were shooting in New York, we reached out to him, and then we just were flooded with like amazing kids, and they like truly make the movie, I think.
What was their reaction to the Sundance? Like, how are they sort of involved now in the rollout? Because they are really like, it's such a great showcase for them.
Yeah, they excitingly have not seen the movie and will be seeing it today. So they're all here, and we're very excited to see how it plays up for them, because I think it will be an intense experience. They're definitely all over this thing. Yeah.
Totally, and I think it will partially play for them as like a montage that you watch at the end of a camp session of like a reminder of your experience. So hopefully they love it as a piece, but I think mostly they'll just remember the experience they had.
And I think when we were we had so much footage and hour-long takes, and it was like, we were studying for the SATs again, like going crazy to get it all done. But what was really important to us was that it was like a true ensemble for all the adults and all the kids, and I really feel like everyone has a moment, and so it's really exciting that they all get to share in this. That's what I hope is that everybody from this movie gets other opportunities, and that we can share the wealth. You don't need to have one specific lead.
That's so great. Are there any movies by other filmmakers that you're excited to see, you're planning to see while you're here?
Yeah, we're huge fans of John Carney, and definitely specifically Sing Street. It's always even making this movie was a great thing to pull on, of just kids being real, and so we're very excited to see his film for sure. And
and I just worked with Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and she has a Nicole Hall Center movie, so I'm very excited to see that too. But I wish getting a ticket, it's like a hot ticket. There are so many movies, and especially in our category, that we would love to see. So hopefully we'll see them in another way soon.
You guys are speaking my language. I have Flora and Sun Panel tomorrow, shameless plug, and I love Nicole Hall Center. So yeah, maybe I'll see you there. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate you coming by. Any more questions since I last tossed it out?
Closing it out.
I wanted to congratulate you guys on the film and just your work together. I have a question on behalf of, as a father, but because I have the microphone, I just want to first and just thank Ben Platt for your role in Dear Evan Hansen. Yes, come on.
Yeah.
I actively, proactively, diligently manage a bipolar condition, but it still gets tough. And your songs and your voice got me through some tough times. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that.
And my question to you is, as a father of a 13-year-old, rambunctious, active, engaged, female future daughter who loves theater, what advice would you give for the next generation growing up with social media, confluences, access, but also just everything thrown at them? How do you get to that? What do you do for the next generation of thespians?
I mean, two things come to mind. One would be something that we've sort of touched on, which is to never lose sight of the live in-person experience. And that extends to, obviously, the love of theater and also just friendships that really are meaningful in person, face-to-face, because I know it's, even us, that social media has become our world and virtual things can feel so real, but just really remembering to take your self-worth and your most meaningful emotional growth from the people that are looking at you and spending time with you and continuing to connect with you for years at a time in some cases. And then in terms of the theater of it all, I would just say leaning into I think we're getting, in a really beautiful way, much more into an individual culture and a focus on the differentiation rather than what archetype or stock character you can fit into. So just really honing in on what is your weirdness and strangeness and just flying your freak flag.
If everyone could join me in giving a big round of applause to the team from Theater Camp.
Thank you so much.
Molly Gordon, Ben Platt, Noah Galvin, Nick Lieberman.